so far. Oh, I'm looking to see if the Prime Minister's coming out, and here he is.
All right, thanks, Joyce.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning.
Over the last few weeks, our women and men in uniform have been working to help the most vulnerable Canadians as we deal with this pandemic. And as the need for their help continues, we've received new requests to extend this period of deployment in both Ontario and Quebec, and we will be following up. Members of the Canadian Armed Forces are doing an incredible job, just like always. They are serving with distinction for our grandparents, our parents, our elders. In Ontario, they've made some extremely troubling observations about several long-term care facilities in which they've been serving, and we have shared this information with the provincial government. As I've said many times, we need to do a better job of caring for the people who built this country. The greatest generation saw us through World War II, and we need to be there to support them properly through this global crisis. I spoke with Premier Ford on this earlier this morning to let him know that, of course, we would be there to help as he takes action on improving care for seniors in long-term care centres. Our government will continue to support Ontarians through this, and I know this is something the Premier will be addressing in greater detail at his press conference later today. This morning, I also wanted to provide an update on personal protective equipment. In the last 10 weeks alone, over 40 flights have arrived in Canada carrying much-needed PPE. This represents hundreds of thousands of items, everything from masks to hospital gowns, that we've shipped to our frontline workers. At the same time, we're also investing in production here at home. And on that front, today, we're taking yet another critical step forward. I can announce that we've signed a contract with General Motors to produce 10 million face masks. As we speak, GM employees are already making these masks. They will keep people safe and help slow the spread of COVID-19. And for the auto workers in Oshawa, this contract will support good, well-paying jobs in an industry that's faced tough times. On testing, we're also making progress. We're supporting companies and research centres across the country as they develop new, improved COVID-19 test kits and products. And for life-saving healthcare equipment, we've signed a new contract for 10,000 ventilators that are being produced through a partnership between Canadian Nobel laureate Dr. Art MacDonald, his team, and Vexos. Deliveries will begin this summer, bringing our total of made-in-Canada ventilators to 40,000. On this and on other supplies for frontline workers, I know that Minister Baines and Minister Anand will have more details to share a little later today.
Over the last 10 weeks, 40 planes transporting personal protective equipment arrived to Canada. We're talking here of hundreds of thousands of articles, masks, hospital gowns that have been distributed to our workers of first line. At the same time, we are working with enterprises across the country to improve our capacity to have these articles made here. Today, I can say that we've signed a contract with General Motors to produce 10 million masks. As we speak, people that work for GM have already started to prepare these masks, and they will be ready soon. As far as testing, we are also improving. Across the country, we are supporting countries and research centers so that we can have new COVID-19 tests, and we're doing the same thing for ventilators. We've signed a contract to produce 10,000 ventilators that will be made in partnership with Art MacDonald and his team and the Vexus enterprise.
Over the past 2 months, we've rolled out targeted support for sectors that have been hit hard by COVID-19. And we know that more needs to be done. Just look at the food industry. With the growing season underway, farmers are working harder than ever to keep Canadians fed. But because of COVID-19, many are having trouble finding workers. So today, I can announce that our government is funding up to 700 youth jobs in that industry. This will support the people who put food on our plates while creating new opportunities for young people. This builds on what we've already done, from connecting more Canadians of every age with work in the sector to supporting seasonal workers. At this
time of the year, farmers are working harder than ever to feed Canadians. But because of COVID-19, many employers have difficulty finding workers to help them. So we will finance up to 700 youth jobs in that industry that will give and to those who are feeding our families and also creating new connections for students.
Canadians have been focused on our families and on our neighbors, on our communities and our country. But we've also been closely engaged with how the world is managing COVID-19, not only because the only way to truly end this virus in Canada is to end it everywhere, but because as a trading nation, with Canadians who trace their origins to every corner of the planet, we understand better than most how connected the world has become. Canadian jobs and businesses depend on stable and productive economies in other countries, so it matters to us how everyone weathers this storm. For so many, this pandemic is devastating. More than 300 million people around the world will be out of work, and more than 30 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty. We can't wait for others to act. It's not in our self-interest, and it's just not who we are. We can and we must seize the opportunity to do what we can to make people safer and more prosperous, to create an international system that recognizes who's left behind and strives to lift them up. This is no small task, but I know we're up to it. Canada is ready to do our part as we help bring the world together in the fight against COVID-19. On Thursday, I will be convening a high-level meeting with the Secretary General of the UN and the Prime Minister of Jamaica to consider global economic challenges and how to better support developing countries. We're bringing together leaders from every region of the world, as well as the heads of international institutions, to work on shared strategies to protect the global economy, support our citizens, and help the most vulnerable. I've been speaking to many leaders about these issues and about the importance of global cooperation. This includes Chancellor Merkel of Germany and President Macron of France just yesterday, and leaders from the Caribbean and from across Africa, Latin America, and the Pacific. And key international financial experts like Canada's own Mark Carney are getting involved too. To address this pandemic, to keep people safe, to help our economies weather the storm, we need to collaborate. And with this forum, Canada will be there to help lead the way forward. Canada
as a trading country which links across the world. Our jobs, our companies, our workers, our economy depends in part of a world economy in good health. And in this pandemic, we cannot close our eyes on the world that we're living in. We cannot forget the most vulnerable, the ones that are living in the far countries or in the Caribbean, for many of them. Pandemic is a catastrophe. As Canadians, we know that we have a role to play. We can and we must build a safer, most prosperous world and to make sure that our international system is more equitable, more fair. It's a challenge. It's a huge challenge, but I know that we're up to it. Thursday, I have asked for a meeting with the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Prime Minister of Jamaica. And we're going to discuss on the world's challenges on the economic level and how we can help developing countries. This will be the occasion for leaders to help and to elaborate strategies for the future of the world economy and help our citizens and the most vulnerable. I discussed of these questions and the importance of international cooperation with many leaders. Notably, I spoke yesterday to Chancellor Merkel and the French President Macron. And I'll also discuss with leaders of the Caribbean, of Africa, of South America, and of Pacific. And of course, all the experts of world renown like Canadian Mark Carney will participate in these discussions. If we work together, if we stay focused on what we've got to do, I know that we're going to go through together and come back stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. For questions, star one. Première question, Raymond Fillon,
First question, Raymond Fillon from TV. Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister. You're talking about the militaries, the prolongation of their collaboration. You've got a deadline of till time the Canadian Armed Force will be on the field. We've had the request actually yesterday from Quebec asking for prolongation. We have discussion to have with both provinces, Ontario and Quebec. Of course, we're going to be there to help.
We just received the requests for assistance in the past days, including only yesterday for Quebec. So we will be following up with the Premier's offices, but of course we will continue to help.
Right, and suivi?
As for asylum demander, those that are guardian angels, is your government ready to treat their files in priority? For the last few weeks, Minister Menechino has been engaged on this issue. We know that there are some extraordinary people that are doing a heroic job in our long-term centers, and we must see how we can help them. We're looking into it right now.
Merci. Prochaine question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Mia Rabson, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Good morning. I'm just curious if you can explain to us what the difference is between the special COVID-19 committee being safe to sit in Parliament if you don't think it's safe for the full House of Commons to sit in reduced numbers.
I think it's been important that we've had a parliament and a democracy that has continued to function. Over the past number of weeks, we've had 3 days a week of sessions where the opposition can bring forward their questions, make their suggestions, and demonstrate to all Canadians that our institutions continue to function. We know that continuing that approach now 4 days a week will be important to continue to respond to this extraordinary challenge of our time. We are, however, continuing to work on the issue of voting. Before we move forward on voting, we want to try and make sure as much as possible that we are able to bring in remote voting. I know that the Proc Committee of Parliament is studying that carefully. I think it'd be important to ensure that Canadians across the country have an ability to make their voices and their decisions heard in Parliament through that process. That continues to be something that we're working on.
And a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm also curious, given that you had a known exposure to COVID-19 early on, when the serological testing becomes available, do you plan to get one?
Yes, I do. I think serological testing is an important part of understanding exactly how COVID-19 has been present in the country, including in people who haven't displayed any symptoms at all. And as soon as those tests become more largely available to Canadians, I will certainly ensure that I'm one of them. Okay.
Yes, I think it's important to know to which point COVID-19 has been propagating in the population, even amongst the people that didn't have any symptoms, and possibly me. So when the serological testing will be available, largely available, I'll make sure to get one.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question.
Next question.
Le Devoir.
Le Devoir. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back on this question of asylum demanders. If you are agreeing that there's a principle that the status of certain people can be regularized quickly so that they don't and become asking for immigration status. We've been looking, recognizing a long time that people that arrive to the country are contributing to our protection, to our success as country. Our government has always been open to immigration and always valorized the people that are arriving. As far as the asylum demanders, those who are not irregular, but they are working in a long-term facility. They're doing heroic work to protect Canadians. We are looking into how we can recognize this work and how we can accelerate the processes so that they can be eligible for immigration. But I feel that there's a certain change of position. If I listen to what your Vice Prime Minister, Mrs. Freeland, said, we're a country of right. We have to respect the process. So I understand that you might be willing to go around the process. We are in a situation particular and exceptional because of the COVID-19 crisis. And this crisis is asking us to review certain things. Of course, our system of immigration is based on the respect of process and equity, freedom. It's for everyone. It's important to follow the process. But in this exceptional situation, we can, of course, see some exceptions possible.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis,
Next
La
question,
Presse.
Mélanie Marquis, La Presse.
Oui, bonjour, merci beaucoup.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. On immigrants, Mr. Trudeau, how many are they, do you think? And how many could have his status regularized? And we feel that you are in agreeing, but what are the obstacles that you're seeing to make this concrete? I think people recognize that the heroes that are working in exceptional work in an extremely difficult situation should have a certain acknowledgement. But we have also some considerations. There's a rigor and robust, complex system. So the Minister of Immigration is looking into this situation. What would be the details of such an approach? We understand that there's a desire in the population to recognize and to thank these people, but we must make sure that it's made in the right way.
Oui, merci. En suivi,
follow-up. In another file, the leader of Bloc Québécois says that you were failing to be a moral leader. He doesn't see how your party can touch the subsidy. Do you think that you should ask that you renounce to this subsidy? The wage subsidy has been put in place to help all organizations, all enterprises that have a lower revenue so that we can help the workers. So this subsidy, this grant doesn't judge of the style of work, the style of enterprise or organization. We're simply looking how we can help the people that depend of their work and make sure that they still have a paycheck and to support their families, to do the groceries. In political parties, there are some people that work as translators, as receptionists, as these people are doing a work that's important for them and their family. And we have created this grant to help these people to keep their jobs and instead of be fired or because of a lower revenue of their organization. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Christian Noël from Radio-Canada. In your speech, you said the soldiers in long-term facilities. I'm asking, is it only in Ontario and Quebec? What are we talking exactly? Of negligence? On the observations that have been made by the militaries? I have read a report yesterday of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I can say it's extremely troubling. We made me follow up this report to the government of Ontario to share this report in a few hours with Quebec and discuss it in more long. We're going to be there to help, that's certain. We must do better to protect our elderly, our seniors in long-term facilities across the country. This report precisely talks about the situation in Ontario, but we're continuing to look into it across the country.
I read the report in full yesterday. We shared it with the provincial government of Ontario over the weekend. It is deeply disturbing. There are things in there that are extremely troubling, and we need to take action. And I spoke with the Premier this morning to assure him that, of course, the federal government would be there to support them as they deal with this situation. We need to do a better job of taking care of our elders in long-term care facilities in Ontario and indeed right across the country. The Premier will be sharing this report with Canadians in the coming hours and will be speaking at more length on it, and I will leave that for him.
Without getting into details, because you don't want to scoop the Prime Minister of Ontario, what disturbed you the most? What troubled you the most? And were you sad, disgusted, shocked, as far as emotion? Yes, I was sad. I was shocked. I was disappointed. I was mad. I think that we are seeing a situation that obviously it's a reality that has been linked to COVID, but that's been there for a long time. And we must, as a country, improve. I'm going to let, this is a provincial jurisdiction, so I'm going to let the lead to Prime Minister Ford. But like I said many times since the start of this pandemic, if it's our elderly that are suffering the most of this pandemic, it's our seniors that we must support better. And the federal government will be there in the discussion to have immediately and for the long term to improve the support to those who build this country.
On reading the deeply disturbing report, I had obviously a range of emotions of anger, of sadness, of frustration, of grief. It is extremely troubling. And as I've said from the very beginning of this, we need to do a better job of supporting our seniors in long-term care right across the country through this pandemic and beyond. This is a situation that has gone on for a long time. We need to take action as a country. The federal government will be there to support provinces in their jurisdictions on dealing with this as we move forward.
Tom Perry with CBC. You've read this report. Are you concerned that the problems that it reveals are not limited only to Ontario? And what specifically can the federal government do right now to deal with these issues?
The federal government is there to help. We have stepped up with members of the Canadian Armed Forces in a number of long-term care facilities across the province and indeed across Ontario and Quebec. But the challenges faced by this system of long-term cares is larger than just the places that the Canadian Armed Forces are showing up in. So we need to have a conversation and we need to take action as a country on improving care. There are many extraordinary, excellent long-term care facilities across this country. There are some that obviously are not doing as well, that we need to make sure we are improving the standards of care and the support for Canadians as they retire, as they reach that phase of their lives. The federal government, as I've said from the beginning, will be part of the conversations with the provinces on how we move forward, how we learn from this crisis and what we've learned through this crisis, and move forward.
We are facing a situation that obviously is tough, that has been enduring for a long term. Before the pandemic, in our long-term care facilities, and the support to our elderly is not up to what we should be expecting as Canadians. Obviously, there are some centers, long-term facilities, that are extraordinary in the way that they help and heal and take care of the seniors. But some others are not doing, they're not at par, they're not doing as well. And like I said, we must, as a society, work together to improve the quality of the cares that are given to our elderly, and the federal government will be there to support the provinces in the work they must do.
PPEs, you're talking about the flights that have arrived, but where are we running into bottlenecks? What's preventing us from getting even more of this equipment?
I think there is there are global challenges around provision of PPE. We have demonstrated with 40 flights and hundreds of thousands of items, many in the millions, that we have received and distributed across the country, that we are providing for Canadians as we need to. But at the same time, we recognize that as the economy reopens, as perhaps a second wave might hit us, we need to be ready. And that's why we continue to draw on even more PPE. We continue to go through stringent and rigorous quality control, because we have seen a rise in counterfeit products and products that don't meet a rigorous Canadian standards. We have ensured that every item that has been distributed in Canada has met our standards. But it's why we've also moved towards increasing and creating domestic production for PPE. And Canadians stepping up to help Canadians is what this country is all about. And we're going to continue to do the work necessary to ensure that right across the country we have the PPE necessary to move forward safely.
We have worked from the start to make sure that the PPE is available and distributed across the country, and it's of high quality. We're continuing to receive products from various countries in the world. At the same time, we're creating some domestic production, because we know that as the economy reopens, there might be a second wave. We might need more items of PPE, and we must be ready for that second wave. So we're going to be ready, because that's what we're doing as a country.
John McGregor, CTV News. This report from the Canadian Forces, was it the findings related to the conditions that people are living in long-term care homes, or did it rise, in your view, to the level of abuse? And in either case, what would you say to people in Ontario whose family members are in these homes right now when they're hearing you talk about this? What should they do?
As I said, the report that we received, we passed along immediately to Ontario. We are working with them on the next steps, but I will leave it to Premier Ford to share that report and discuss the next steps in a couple of hours when he moves forward for his press conference.
As you know, tomorrow we're expecting a decision on Meng Wanzhou's extradition, and this is going to upset people on one side or the other, either the Chinese or the Americans. I'm wondering what level of interaction there's been between your government and your counterparts on the Chinese side and the American side preparing for one of those two possible outcomes. Are you concerned, and have you spoken to them about the possibility of retaliation if it doesn't go their way?
We have continued to engage diplomatically with our partners, both with the Americans and the Chinese, on the issue of Meng Wanzhou and indeed of the two Michaels who've been arbitrarily detained in China. But one of the good things about having a truly independent justice system is that we don't need to apologize or explain for the decisions taken by our independent justice system. We have confidence in that system, in its independence, and we, of course, will continue to abide and defend our system.
Obviously, the negotiations and the discussion has been kept ongoing with American and Chinese counterparts on the questions of Canadians detained in China. One of the advantages to have an independent justice system, totally independent, is that we don't need to explain or to apologize for our system. We trust the judgment and the work that doing the people in our judiciary system, and this is a great advantage.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. Just to follow up on extending the military's mission in long-term care facilities and the horrible conditions the report showed that they have found, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair received a letter back on May 14th outlining these allegations of abuse and neglect. Do you know why the minister and his office would have sat on this letter for 10 days before acting?
When we received this report, we shared it with Ontario. I found out the existence of this report on Friday afternoon. On the weekend, we shared it with Ontario. I read the report yesterday, and it is being made public today. These are things that we needed to move quickly on. These are things that we need to take action on. And as I said, the federal government will be there to support Ontario and other provinces as they move forward.
And just to switch gears a bit, one of your Vancouver MPs has a WeChat group she uses to communicate with Canadians. She has publicly advertised on this group and invited people to join, so it's kind of like a Facebook page, if you will. And she's allowed the group to be used to appeal to Canadians to donate to a lawsuit against a Global News journalist for a story that they don't like. The MP I'm talking about is your Digital Minister for Government, Ms. Joyce Maury. Her mandate letter calls for her to work with the media in, quote, a professional manner. So I'm just wondering why you're allowing this minister and her staff to use the web presence to fundraise on a lawsuit against a journalist.
This is the first I hear of this situation, and we'll be following up.
This is the first time I hear of this situation, and I will do the follow-up.
Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we have just been listening to the Prime Minister make